13,000 people are homeless on the island of Lesbos. They've been living in the largest migrant camp in Greece, but then this happened last night. A fire destroyed the Moria camp, the only welcome news being that no one lost their lives. We know already around 400 unaccompanied children are being flown to the Greek mainland, and Germany is urging EU members to take in migrants, though we'll see if they choose to. We've also had this tweet from the President of the European Commission. She says, "We stand ready to support with member states. Our priority is the safety of those left without shelter." But let's hear about those people who need that help. Amanda Munoz leads an organisation which provides legal aid to refugees in Lesbos.
So at the moment, there are thousands of people that are just on the streets without any type of access to medical aid, water, food, blankets. They spent the whole night. They just lost all of their belongings, the last thing they had. And there's thousands on the streets, and outside the camps, there's police checkpoints where people are not allowed to leave a specific area, and NGOs are also not allowed to access to provide aid. There's people with disabilities, people with suffered torture, sexual violence, and this experience is always re-traumatizing.
Next, let's hear from the Greek authorities. The BBC has spoken to the Greek Minister of Migration and Asylum.
Vulnerable people and families are being taken to a vessel that will be arriving to the port of Mytilene in the next few hours. And then we only have around 2,000 people left without shelters. We are providing emergency accommodation near the camp in Moria.
Now, unfortunately, it's not a surprise there's been a disaster at this camp. It's notoriously overcrowded, around 4 times its capacity. The pressure intensified last week when officials detected the first positive coronavirus cases there. A further 34 cases were then detected, and the camp was put under lockdown. Aid agencies had raised concerns that social distancing and good hygiene were all but impossible because of the numbers in the camp, given its squalid and cramped conditions. Here's the Greek Minister of Migration and Asylum again on what led to the fire.
It appears it started from asylum seekers that did not like the quarantine. We found 35 positive COVID-19 patients out of 2,000 tests. We had to take these people into a quarantine area. That created disorder, which led to the fires and multiple fires. Of course, the fire brigade and the police will be investigating. There will be zero tolerance for such acts of violence.
Now, thousands of people have arrived on Lesbos in recent years. They were placed in this camp and they couldn't leave until their asylum application was processed on the Greek mainland, which has proved to be a slow and bureaucratic process. Our population correspondent Stephanie Hegarty has reported from the Moria migrant camp before. Here she is on who's been living there and what the conditions were like.
The majority are from Afghanistan, about 70%, but the rest is made up of people from 70 different countries, a lot of Syrians. Obviously, this is an arrival point for people who come mostly by boat from Turkey, and we've seen quite an uptick towards the beginning of this year of arrivals on that route. There's also a very tense situation on the island of Lesbos, as has been for the past few months, even before COVID, where some far-right groups had travelled there. Some the local population had expressed a lot of animosity towards migrants. So a really tense situation already on Lesbos, and this is not going to help that in any way at all.
Well, already this tragedy is being linked to some broader failures. Here's the international president of Médecins Sans Frontières tweeting, "What remains of this camp is a testimony to the neglect and failure of the European Union and Greek migration policies. They are to blame for the fire." And that's echoed by any number of commentators. Here's the Greek journalist Martina Stevis-Gridnev writing for the New York Times and saying the ticking time bomb exploded. Devastation for 12,000 people warehoused by the EU in appalling conditions, and devastation too for the locals who have struggled as the last Greek government agreed to the inhumane, open-ended warehousing of people on their island. Or you can read Daniel Howden at the Refugee Studies Centre at Oxford University arguing Lesbos is part of a European system of warehousing and deterring desperate people, with Moria as the centrepiece. It creates a fearful spectacle which is then used to justify the notion that we, Europe, are full and they are dangerous, that there's no other choice. Well, needless to say, the European Union and Greece do not see what's happened in those terms. Here's the Greek Minister of Migration and Asylum again, this time on the broader issue of migration into the EU.
We cannot have unlimited capacity to cope with migration flows. Greece has been asked to carry a burden which was too high. we have been the largest entry point to the EU in the last 5 years. That's something very difficult for Greece to cope, and especially for the 5 islands, Lesbos, Chios, Samos, Kos, and Leros, that took the majority of 2019 arrivals in their shield.
Now, the United Nations Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, has previously warned that this camp was at a boiling point, had urged the Greek government to move asylum seekers away from Lesbos. Astrid Castellane works for the UNHCR, and I spoke to her in Lesbos just within the last hour.
Indeed, we estimate that about 5,000 to 5,500 asylum seekers and refugees have lost their shelter last night. And it might be even worse as a second fire has started again this evening. What we are doing as the UN High Commissioner for Refugees is to work together with the government to find suitable solutions in order to host or to re-establish temporary sites and to protect the most vulnerable, including indeed the unaccompanied minors that are currently being transferred to the mainland. It is indeed an overcrowded site, Moria, where UNHCR has at several occasions urged the government to decrease the population. We are extremely concerned about their living condition, especially in a context of COVID, where the overcrowding does not allow asylum seekers to comply to the basic precautionary measures such as hand washing, physical distancing.